If you currently don't think Kaiba is coming to Jump Force, I might convince you by the end of this video. So if you don't want to see Kaiba in Jump Force, maybe don't watch this video because you might think it's gonna happen. There's a lot of evidence pointing towards Kaiba, and perhaps even some evidence pointing towards some other characters because of recent data mining. So let's get into it. You may recall that I posted a video about Kaiba. This is because a data miner by the name of Sergio found some in-game files of people talking to Kaiba as a lobby character. In that video, I said that there were 4 options. Kaiba was planned to be base roster, Kaiba will be future player versus environment content, which is PvE content, Kaiba will be DLC, or Kaiba is some combination of all of those things. Since then, information has come out not only on Seto Kaiba, but a handful of other characters as well. First, let's get into the audio files that were found. These are likely intro dialogue options, so we'll take a listen, and then I'll talk about what we can take away from this information, starting off with Yugimoto.
Kaiba, 憎しみの果てに真の勝利はない。Kaiba, 今は手を貸すぜ。
These roughly translate to Kaiba, you can make the first move. And secondly, Yugi appears to be warning Kaiba about not doing anything too sneaky. This is just meant to be a general warning. It's difficult to translate into English, I've been told, but regardless, he's talking to Kaiba. Moving on to Kenshiro, who says, These roughly translate to Roah, it is now time for us to fight. And then also, with Roah and Toki's love, my fist is absolute. Kaioh. Next we have Seiya, who says, These roughly translate to Saga, this is the end, and Aiolia, I will not lose to you. Finally, we can move on to Deku, who says, which translates to Kachkan, I'm going to do my best to beat you. And no, that wasn't me stuttering. That was in the actual audio. So in these files, we have 6 new characters that are being directly talked to. We have Roah, Kaioh, Saga, Aiolia, Kaiba, and Bakugo. So what can we take away from this information? Sadly, I don't think there's a lot of information we can take away. Just because these characters are audio files in the game doesn't mean anything specifically. Voice actors don't have a lot of time. So I think what happened here is that when they were called into the studio, the developers weren't 100% sure about what characters they were going to use in the game, but they had some general ideas of characters that could make it. It would make sense to me that Roah, Kaioh, Saga, Aiolia, Kaiba, and Bakugo could all be on that list of potential characters before they started trimming the fat. So if you've already got voice actors in, you should probably get them to record a little bit of audio, assuming that those characters are in. Just kind of covering their bases for not only potential DLC or base roster, but maybe even an additional season. That way they wouldn't have to call in the voice actors again to get them to re-record the audio. So even if these characters are being talked to in the audio files, that does not mean that they were worked on at all. So I do think this alone is poor evidence to suggest that these characters are on their way. However, there is some more evidence pointing towards perhaps some of these characters. In the game files, we can look at the character models, which are actually labeled in order of the character select screen. In these folders, we can see that there are 7 empty slots. 3 of these slots are after the Bleach characters. You could either assume that they're going to be Bleach characters or they're going to be original characters, or not original characters, sorry, but characters from new series. There's also 2 slots after the original characters. And finally, there are 2 slots after Shiryu. This could be evidence to suggest that 2 new Saint Seiya characters are on the way. I currently don't think that we're going to get 2 Saint Seiya characters, but this could lead you to thinking that we are going to in fact get those characters. I suppose I'll mention this just in case. If we do get 2 Saint Seiya characters, I think they would pretty easily be Saga and Aiolia at this point. While I think that these characters mentioned in the audio files, Roah, Kaioh, Saga, Aiolia, Kaiba, and Bakugo, I think that these were just initially concepts. I think that the way the development process probably would have started is that they just took a handful of characters from every series. Think about it like you're making a wish list, right? They just start listing off all these characters they want in the game or could theoretically add to the game. And then as the development process goes on, they start prioritizing some over others. And when they had these voice actors in to record their lines, they weren't sure which ones they were going to cut along the way. So that's why they have voice lines mentioning these characters who could have theoretically made the cut, but didn't. So again, I think they were just concepts. However, I do think Bakugo will end up joining the roster because it's Bakugo, the rival to the main character of one of the most popular anime in the world right now, and I'll let you decide about Kaiba yourself because we're going to talk about him a little bit more. However, before we go into that conversation about Kaiba, you should know that I'm incredibly biased when it comes to Kaiba. I really want Kaiba in this game, but I also think that he is going to come as DLC. When I separate myself from my bias as best as I can as a human being, humans aren't really good at separating their biases, but when I try to separate my biases, I still do think that Kaiba is on his way, given all of this information. So let's lay out all of these characters and we'll go over all of the evidence to suggest that they're going to be in the game. We'll go with Roah and Kaioh. Neither of these two characters initially seem very likely at all. However, they are referenced in these audio files. Again, I don't think that means much. However, they are referenced in these audio files. Neither of them have any customization options in the game that I'm aware of, so additional costumes representing them could be added to the game alongside them as DLC, which we do know that DLC characters come with their costumes, so perhaps that's a little bit of evidence. Past that, the only real evidence you have is Kenshiro's on his own currently in the roster, and he's a little bit lonely. Apart from that, I don't think you have a lot to go off of, so I wouldn't hold my breath for either of these two. Then we have Saga and Aiolia. These guys also don't seem particularly likely, but they have the same amount of evidence, kind of, besides the last one about Kenshiro, because of course, Seiya also has Shiryu. Saga and Aiolia don't have gear pieces in the game right now, but again, I don't think that's particularly good evidence, because you've already got their aesthetic in the game, so adding their costume would feel like a bit of a waste of development time. On top of that, I'm already surprised that Saint Seiya got 2 reps, let alone 4. Another way that they could use these characters' audio files that I've already mentioned is the player versus environment content, the PvE content in the game. Currently we have a mission mode, and I do think they will add gear pieces to the game throughout the life cycle of the game, and one of the ways that they can do that, one of the ways they can add these costumes is perhaps a future event, where instead of fighting fully modeled versions of these characters, they could do a creator character, kind of like the Venoms, where they're wearing these costumes. And let's say, for example, one of the events, one of these missions is that you have to fight Roah, or create a character with Raoh's outfit on. Well, then that mission would force you to play Kenshiro, so that he can have this voice line interaction we talked about earlier on in this video. Bakugo does seem fairly likely. Again, he's the rival to the main character of literally one of the most popular franchises in the world right now. He's also been kind of teased before in the past. Before the release of the game, a couple characters had these little post-it notes that were shown on social media, and Deku's post-it note or postcard was sent to Bakugo. It reads something along the lines of, "I've always admired you," and then dash Deku, meaning that it's a quote from Deku. It was sent by Deku, and no other character calls Deku Deku besides Bakugo and Uraraka. Deku doesn't really look up to Uraraka like that, and we know that this is from the Jump Force headquarters, so I think Deku's sending a postcard to Bakugo letting him know, hey, come join Jump Force. And again, on top of that, he is referenced in these audio files. They probably were pretty confident that Bakugo was either going to be base roster or DLC, so it makes sense that they would have Deku record, or sorry, the voice actor for Deku record some audio. And now, Kaiba, the character with the most evidence behind him, in my opinion. If you consider any character locked in as a DLC character at this point, I think it has to be Kaiba. Kaiba seems incredibly likely. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a very popular series, not only here in the West, and not only among my generation. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a generation-crossing series because of the fact that it refreshes itself every few years. It has a massive following in each generation of gamer and anime fan. Cyrus, the Bandai social media guy, made a joke on Twitter not too long before the release of the game about Blue Eyes White Dragon on the San Francisco stage. This has 2 implications, which I'll get into in just a moment. One implication is that he was playing Blue Eyes White Dragon on the San Francisco stage, which is weird because Blue Eyes White Dragon's not in the game, but it also has implications to what we're going to be talking about in just a minute. Kaiba's jacket is not in the costume system of the game, which is odd because despite that, Marek, a far less fashionable character, does have costume pieces in the game. Again, we know that DLC characters come with their costumes, so this would be an explanation as to why we don't have Kaiba's jacket. There is text files in the game that have been data mined that suggest that Kaiba was or is going to be a lobby character. Yugimoto has text files in the game specifically talking to Kaiba through the story or a mission. So based on all of this information that I just laid out for you, I genuinely believe that there are two options right now. Kaiba was initially planned for the main story mode, and then he was cut due to time restraints, and he will now be DLC instead. Alternatively, I think that when DLC characters are added to the game, they're going to be accompanied by an additional mission that you can go play. Because in the game files, we can see that both you, your creator character, and Yugi Moto are sent on a mission to help Kaiba, who is being attacked by some of the Venoms. This, of course, does not happen in the story mode at all. It's also interesting that that would make a team of 3 perfect for a mission. Your creator character, Kaiba, and Yugi. And then I suppose there is the third option, which is that he was planned for base roster and was cut for some reason. That's it. That's all I've got for you. Those are your 3 options right now. And I think between those 3 options, I think the second one is most likely, and the first one is second most likely, and the third one is, I don't think that's happening, man. I think Kaiba is in this game. I think he's going to be DLC, and I cannot wait to see it happen. I hope that you're on board with it. There's also a bit of evidence to suggest Bakugo, like we went over in this video. The Saint Seiya and Fist of the North Star characters don't seem likely to be at all, but I thought I'd report on it just in case. If you enjoyed this video at all, or you appreciate me talking about this data mined content, I'd appreciate it if you left a like on the video. It helps other people find the content, which obviously helps me out immensely. Subscribe to keep up to date with future content. My name has been Bilbsy, and I will see you in the next video.